Shabbat shalom, everybody. This morning, as I get to do from time to time in my role here at Emanu-El, I get to visit the preschool and visit with the children age 2, 3, and 4. And this morning I visited and we celebrated Shabbat briefly, and then I talked about this week's Torah portion, which is Parshat Noach, Noah's Ark story. And I talked about the animals, big animals, small animals, who can roar, who can look like a fish, all the animals. And then there was a rainbow. And then one of the kids looked at me and said, well, why was there a flood? And I thought, kids say the darndest things. That is precisely the question that rabbinic commentators and all of us are probably thinking when we see that in this week's Torah portion, having just created the world and everything that's in it, God decides to destroy it. I thought we could explore that question a little bit this evening, but first a brief background on what actually happened in this week's Torah portion. We're introduced to Noach, my namesake, and he's introduced as a man who is righteous for his generation. But let's remember that this is a generation that God saw as wicked, as corrupted, as violent and lawless. It's a world that has lost its way. So Noah, being righteous in his generation, was righteous relatively to all the other people. In response to all this lawlessness and violence, God vows to destroy all of creation and start over again. Just 2 sections into the Torah, God vows to start over with the hope of regenerating a humanity that perhaps is more closely aligned with divine values. But God knows God can't start from scratch, and so God preserves what I'm calling starters of every species. And so God invites 2 of each kind, in addition to Noah and his family, to climb aboard the ark and ride out the flood over the course of 40 days and 40 nights. Noah takes him aboard the ark, which in Hebrew is known as a teva. Tevat Noach is Noah's ark, which is interesting because the word teva is the same word that's used in the Moses story that will come a little bit later in our Torah. The word teva is used to refer to the basket that Moses floats down, baby Moses floats down through the Nile. Both Noach and Moshe, Noah and Moses, in their tevot, in their arks or baskets, carry the story of our covenant forward, each floating on water, a force which can both create, as we know, and destroy, as we well know. Water can protect, and water can transform. Noah's teva floats through the flood in order to help humanity start anew, while Moses, centuries later, his teva, although a bit smaller, floats to preserve a life that would eventually lead us out of Egypt and toward the promised land. These tevot are vessels for our covenant, each of them bearing a promise and a connection to God. The Noah story. 40 days and 40 nights, and the flood subsides, and Noah and all those with him, the animals, his family, exit the ark to start anew. And God, as a sign of God's presence and the sign of the covenant, places a rainbow. Earlier, you might have noticed the rainbow. It's still a little bit visible, but a rainbow that's splendid in all of its color, that emerges after the lawlessness, that emerges after the storm of the flood. So it's a great question that the preschooler asked. Why was there a flood? What was so wrong with humanity and the world that God had to start over? The Torah speaks of humanity's crooked ways, even Noah's. Noah was righteous for his generation, but in another generation, he might not have been seen as so righteous. After all, he complied with God's plan. Very interestingly, in the Torah portion, God says, Noah, I'm going to destroy the world, build an ark and save yourself. And Noah says, you got it, without questioning God's orders. Is this righteous, or is this passive, or is this complicit? Everyone, even Noah and his family, had lost their way, failing to care for one another, failing to care for themselves, failing to care for the garden of life they had been entrusted with. And it's something that I believe all of us can relate to, at least on a small level. I got married in June. My wedding is going to give me a lot of material this year. But I want to talk about the ketubah ceremony that happened before we got married, when my grandfather-in-law, Chaim Sheridan of blessed memory, shared a blessing with me and Noah, the two Noahs, about the rainbow, and he referenced the story of Noah's Ark. He referenced that the rainbow is a symbol of pride, it's a symbol of diversity, and it's a symbol of our covenant. The rainbow is not only a sign of God's covenant, but a celebration of the many different ways that light refracts itself in order to create the beauty and the splendor of a rainbow. When looking at a rainbow, you realize, and we can practice this tonight as our stained glass is darkened, we realize that the light we see every day has so much more inside of it. It expands our vision of what's possible and reminds us that we are all unique colors in one magnificent whole, even when we cannot see it. The rainbow is a sign of the covenant, as a reminder that it is always there, not just in the sky, but perhaps a little rainbow that you see in a puddle or a slick of oil under your car, maybe in the garden that's colorful, or in the stained glass, or in a crowd of people. The variety of people and stories and experiences that we encounter reminds us of how complete and interconnected the world is. A rainbow is something that emerges after a storm, but its elements to form it are always there, waiting for us to see it. So in response to this preschooler, why was there a flood? The flood was always there, and the righteousness was always there, and the rainbow refracting those two elements and everything in between forces us to remember what's bigger and what's stronger than any one of the parts. So as we move forward, my prayer is that we see the rainbow in the world, that we see the rainbow in one another, in our communities, and in the world around us, choosing to see it even when it's unseen, recognizing it, respecting it as a sign of our covenant, of a sign of the new world that we inhabit and that we will go forward in. Shabbat Shalom.